welcome to the Catholic Forge, a conversational podcast where we gather to explore our Catholic faith and discuss how it forms our lives. All are welcome to join in this conversation and journey. Thank you for listening. Hey everyone, welcome to the show. This is Eric in Missouri.
And this is John in Illinois.
Well, John, the people have already figured out by the title of the episode, this episode is something special, a little bit different.
That we got out of the office early for today to record.
Well, I brought a little tribute, if you don't mind. Are you ready?
A little tribute or trivia?
Tribute and plenty of trivia.
Okay, go for it.
Here we go. Welcome to the Catholic Forge. Welcome to the Catholic Forge. To the Catholic Forge. Welcome to the Catholic Forge.
Exquisite. Exquisite.
I thought maybe you'd bring your harmonica along there, John, but I don't.
You should have warned me ahead of time.
Or your accordion, but indeed,
I should, properly, I should have had a banjo though to respond to your playing.
Fair enough. Well, first of all, before we get into that at all, Ben was slated to appear on tonight's card, but he's not feeling well, and so our best wishes to him and to his quick recovery. But I know that he and Alice and you and Cecilia and Tori and myself all love NBC's The Office. All right.
If he would have some more mung beans, he would be all right. He just needs to get some of those mung beans.
Oh my gosh. And I don't know of any other show that we could say that all six of us appreciate equally. You know, have you watched it more than once, or like did you watch it all the way through and then kind of pick apart episodes here and there?
I'm not really sure I want to admit it on air. I unfortunately have probably seen the entire series 2 or 3 times, and then it's kind of our go-to in the evening when we're just like, we're done and there's nothing good on. We'll just watch an episode of The Office. That's kind of like old friends kind of thing. So we sit down with the gang and watch it, and go through old memories with them.
Sure.
Yeah, so it's been quite a few times for us, and interspersed. I'm not a fan of the Robert California episodes. Just a little too racy for me. So I often skip that season.
Those seasons? Oh my gosh, sure.
Yeah. And the Will Ferrell episodes.
You don't care for those?
A bit if Will Ferrell is listening at this time, as I've heard that he does, I love those episodes. If he's not, they're deplorable.
If you've already thrown James Spader in the trash, then you shouldn't be afraid of you can displace Will Ferrell. But
he is the Lizard King. He might come after me.
Oh my gosh! But Tori and I, we treat it the same way, where if she's feeling a little tired or the timing doesn't quite work out, or like tonight after the podcast, I'm going to go upstairs and she'll say, I got about maybe a half an hour, 45 until I'm going to go to bed. What do you want to do? And if those are the parameters, it'll almost always be one of those Thursday night shows, The Office, Parks and Rec, or John, what's the other one? 30 Rock. And what we found, we just watched an episode recently of The Office. We did a couple nights in a row. We just watched one. And I was amazed at how every episode seems to have one of those little hidden gems that you forget about. But then as soon as it's happening, you're like, and the one that we watched was it called Beach Party? Where Michael's
getting someone to replace his position there in the hot dog eating contest.
He simulates a survivor on the shore of Lake Scranton to find someone, because he's going to interview for this position at corporate, and then Jim and Karen and anyway, and I'd totally forgotten about like Andy falling over in Lake Scranton in the sumo suit and like floating off.
and Angela's there. I can't hear you. Yeah. I can't understand you.
What, Andy? Because she's like conspiring with Dwight so that he has a better shot at. Oh my gosh! And actually, maybe somewhat overlooked, but in the concourse of the series, a real landmark moment for Pam when she walks across the coals, in secret. Of course, the camera person's there, but she does this on her own, and then she confronts Jim. Okay, so now if you haven't seen this show, please forgive for the gushing, but there's so much to say, and I would say, if you haven't seen it, pause us right here, and then scoot over to Netflix.
Come back in a year. After a year of binge watching.
Yeah, sure. And granted, this show is not for everyone. I know people who are not into this, and that's fine, because there's plenty of TV that I'm not into. And people have, just the same way that I would tell someone like, oh, you've got to check out The Office or any other show. Think of any show, and they would
Man in the High Castle.
Sure, they would tell me like, "Oh, Eric, you've got to watch The West Wing. You're gonna love it," And so I'm like, okay, and I couldn't get. I think I got through one season, and I just couldn't hang with it. It wasn't for me. I'm not saying it was bad. It's a great show, but it just wasn't gonna work for me.
That's kind of how I felt about Parks and Rec.
Really. This wasn't quite there.
It wasn't bad. It was too sitcom-y. Whereas
Yeah.
30 Rock or which is still very comical oriented, it still had a little better feel. Whereas The Office felt a little more like life and the way it was filmed and stuff. So,
do you know that Parks and Rec was supposed to be a crossover from The Office? Are you aware of this?
No.
The idea was that. It seems really weak to say it now, but it was kind of clever, and I'm sure they would have built on it. But the idea was that one of the actual copy machines from the Dunder Mifflin office in Scranton was going to get sold and go to the Parks and Rec office in Pawnee, Indiana. And
I'm really surprised that there wasn't anything done like that.
Well, because Karen, what's her name? She reappears as Anne in the show, and it was always sort of like this could have been a crossover, and maybe Michael Scott would have popped in at one point, or little cameos, but not a big deal anyway. So, but you always had that kind of feeling that these three shows could exist in the same space, that when you're in Jack Donaghy's office in 30 Rock, that you can imagine Michael scurrying around on the streets anyway. So ahead,
I gotta say though, as you're talking about that, I resisted The Office for years.
No, really?
I was appalled by the humor, and that's something we'll have to come back to, but particularly That's What She Said jokes. And that was,
sure.
Everyone was saying that. That's what she said. That's what she said. And I just thought that was just so repulsive, and I wasn't going to give into it. Yeah. And my brother watched the series, and he's like, oh, you got to watch it. It's so delightful. And I'm like, no way. I've seen an episode. It was just awful. I'm not doing it.
Yeah.
And finally I gave in, and then I watched a few more episodes, and then I was hooked. But I resisted it for a long time. And what's really neat about this series is it still has that relevance. My wife is a teacher in a high school, and at the beginning of the year, she always takes a survey of the kids to kind of find out who they are and what they like. And she asked them one of the things she asked is, what's your favorite thing on TV? And she said, hands down, for the last 3 years,
Sure.
The Office has won with both the freshmen and the juniors. They always say The Office is the number one show that they like. I don't know if that's a good thing that they're watching The Office, but it is curious to me how it has had that longevity. And of course, what's its rating on Netflix? It's probably it's one of their biggest booms,
And really, I'm glad you mentioned that, because sort of the inspiration for this episode came through a false presumption that I had. Somewhere I had read that Netflix was going to take The Office off of their streaming service, which would be,
the end of Netflix.
Well, that's not true, but you know what I mean? But you're right. So many people have enjoyed it and continue to enjoy that, and so many other big NBC shows on Netflix, that I was thinking, oh, well, gosh, if they're going to take it down, we should send it off with a bang and give it an episode of The Catholic Forge. That's not happening, but we're still here because engaging with popular culture, and especially popular media, is, and at least should be, part of our Christian call. Now, you'd mentioned that initially you were kind of resistant, and you especially found some of the That's What She Said humor a bit repulsive. Obviously, you were won over at some point, but by talking about this show, we are not giving our just unilateral stamp of approval to everything that's said and done.
Definitely not.
In that show. And to that effect, I mean, you have the likes of two spiritual sponsors of the Catholic Forge. You have your Bishop Barron's and you have your Father Mike Schmitz's. And they talk about popular media all the time, but they're talking about popular media that they do not necessarily endorse. However, since it is in the public eye, they're looking at it through the lens of faith and asking, how can we engage with this media to reach people with the gospel? And because The Office has had such landmark success, I think it's an excellent, two things. I think it's an excellent sort of study because it's so well known, and also an excellent study because of its content. And so what we're going to try and do here is maybe we can have like a little lab session, how, first of all, and this doesn't have to do with the show at all, how do you engage and evaluate a source? What do you look for? What kind of things are you watching for? And then how do you use it as a tool for meditation, for reflection, and even for growth in your spiritual life? Now, John, do you have any kind of off-the-top suggestions, or do you just want to get right at it here?
You just opened so many cans there. I don't know which one to sip from first. Yeah, I think we just ought to dive right in. When you mentioned this, you talked about what does it mean, or what's really the value of this. And I think what gained me when I began, and I still am repulsed by, there is an undue amount of sexual humor. It's far less, not that that's an acceptable thing, but it's far less than most of the things that are on Netflix or on TV. Mm-hmm. But there is quite a bit of sexual humor. You've got, I think, basically every character is having sex outside of marriage, things that I really found annoying and weren't necessary elements to the show. But I think what drew me in the beginning was the Pam and Jim story, in the fact that I really identified with Jim. I had been in that place so many times. There's this girl, this longing, having this long-seated romance that was one direction. That felt very natural for me. In college, it was. We should have hung out together, Jim and I, the character, because we were having that same exact experience, and that is what is so wonderful about the actors. Are really quite wonderful, and Jim is really, you see so much through the way they act and their nonverbal stuff. There's the one episode where Jim can't speak because Pam has jinxed him, and he has to get a code for her.
I love it. Yep.
And I love that episode because you really get to see the quality of the acting there in Jim. You see him saying, "I love you" with his eyes to Pam, and it instantly makes her nervous at the time because she's still, engaged at the time. And I connected with that. But so therefore, unlike so many other sitcoms, there was a realism in the behavior. It wasn't a slapstick, and that's what I found difficult with Parks and Rec. It feels too sitcom-y, and most other, even like The Big Bang Theory, a show that I find very boring. It's just way too much of a sitcom. I know there's so many fans of that show. I just can't get over the feel of the show. It's but it was so real to life in the emotions and things like that was there. And therefore, that's the thing that I really get is the character study, I think. They are such unique, and I need to stop talking because I've been talking for a while.
No, that's okay.
But that character study is really something that I enjoy about it. And when you look at people like Michael, this narcissist, I know a guy like that. You look at Dwight, this guy that is never wrong and is always kind of in your face. I know a guy like that. There are so many of the characters that, while they are over-exaggerations and they are stereotypes of a character, they're really neat to see that broad spectrum of personality types that I actually encounter and I can connect with.
Yeah, what you're approaching with that question, what does this mean, is exactly the question that we would ask of any piece of art, really, or even, I guess you could extend it to even any experience, but certainly when it comes to art, which is mysterious to us, the viewer or the interpreter. So whether it's Hotel California, a song, or a painting or a statue or a monument or whatever it is, even if you don't enjoy it per se, just as you said, some people are not going to enjoy The Office. Still, even then, you could ask, what does it mean? It could even be that someone who doesn't enjoy it will have a more clear sense of it than someone who does. Now, I think one of the temptations with The Office is if you watch the whole thing through, and good for you if you did, you deserve some kind of medal, that you can end kind of the whole...
Do you get a Dundee or do you get one of the yogurt lid medals?
That was what did Creed say?
From doing the Flonkerton.
Yeah, Creed said, I don't own a bed, but I kept that medal. Wasn't that so sweet in the finale? But, oh, God darn, John, I lost it there.
I know.
No, it's okay. No, it was a fair derailing because trivia is most welcome. But, oh yes, of course, what does it mean is that I'm thinking, of course, of Seinfeld, right? Where basically they look at themselves in the mirror. The show looks at itself in the mirror at the end of Seinfeld and says to itself, you were about nothing. This was a show about nothing. I was tempted to feel that way about The Office as well. This is a show about nothing. But that would not be accurate because there is...
it wasn't even accurate for Seinfeld. It was a clever saying.
And so that's what I mean is Seinfeld said it of itself, but naturally there was more there. And there is so much here. And just because you brought up the example of Jim and Pam, allow me to throw in with that as well. That was the moment when I knew I wanted to watch this show, was that first solemn kiss in the dark. In the office there upstairs, she's on. Where were they? Some kind of party or something?
They had been at the casino night,
right? Yes, and so they had been there, and she goes upstairs to call her mom, and that's when he comes in and he kisses her. And I remember...
That was their second kiss. They kissed in the parking lot, or at least he approached her to kiss when they were outside standing in the parking lot, and then they went, or was that the first one up there?
No, the first one was up there. And it's okay. Now, but they did kiss at the Dundies, and that was before when she was drunk. Was that right?
There was kind of a thing.
Well, she kissed him, anyway. But just the intimacy of that moment and how it was handled, how it was shot. That's the thing is, I hadn't really watched a lot of the show even up to that point, and that was in the second season. And it was in college, and they had the DVDs, they were playing them, or something or other. And I stumbled in, and I watched a couple episodes, and I watched that scene, and it rang so true to me. The deep intimacy of that, and even, like you said, the unrequited love. Man, do I know? Come on. But also that sense of the forbidden love as well. This longing, like you said, for a girl that's with another guy or whatever it is, or that's unavailable for whatever reason. It really struck home with me. And so this certainly is not a show about nothing. A show about nothing could not have something so resonant within it. And it is not just Jim and Pam. I think that you had told me once that even after they kind of got engaged, and certainly after they got married and the kids came, the show lost a lot of that momentum. Do you remember seeing that? I feel like you said that at one point.
There is, and of course that's always the danger. And so you get into this whole thing of Michael in and out that happens. But the Jim and Pam story really was what sold me on it, and I feel like it did lose some steam. It does pick itself back up, and it starts to rewrite its direction that it goes into. But that long love story that goes on, it's hard to, once you've resolved that and they're married, to go, all right, what else do we go on about? And they did. I think they successfully went on. But to me, that was, of course, the heart of the show that really pulled me in.
So in light of the gospel then, or in light of our faith, what can we find here? What can we pull from here? And this is something of the work of the new evangelization in general. And that is, we can sit here, I mean, John, I know we could sit here and gush about The Office for another hour. It's not even a question. But really the work and the ministry of engaging with popular media is looking at the show, looking at its content, and finding a way to bring to life biblical principles. Now, of course, this is exactly what Jesus did during his own time with the parables. And so he was just being clever. He made them up on the spot, I guess. I don't know. Maybe they were popular sayings of the time. Well, this is the popular saying of our time. Sadly, that's what she said. But also,
yeah, I'm not sure that I want to compare them to the parables, but I get what you're saying. Go ahead.
That is our mission, because it's not quite as effective to go out into the street and tell people about the virgins and the trimmed wicks, but we can talk with people who have no interest or access or contact with the church. You could talk to them about Bears beats Battlestar Galactica, John.
Yeah. I mean, you got to know what kind of a bear is going to be the most dangerous bear. I actually had in my question box, I have a question box for RCIA for people to be able to ask questions that they are nervous to ask the class. And I kid you not, the last question of the year that was dropped in the box, I opened it up. It was, what is the best kind of bear? So I promptly responded. I told them that it was the best question that had been put in all year long, very sarcastically. And then I told them what was the best order of bears, and they were delighted and confused. But, I think there are a lot of... So using this idea, and this came... Ben helped us when we were discussing this, so we need to give him some credit with this. The Angela character. We have here the Pharisee of the new time, somebody that is, here's the rules, but I'm not following the rules myself, that somehow I'm going to be saved by following the rules. And you see that her life goes into ruin because of that adherence to the rules, but not her heart. And that, of course, is one of the downfalls of her character, is that she claims this religion on her outside, but it doesn't go into her exterior in the way that it actually affects the way that she lives in her relationship with Dwight and Andy. She's a very conniving kind of person. And so while I would hate that for that to be the image of Christianity for people, it is a model of when we are Pharisaical and wear only our religion or our faith on the outside of us. And it is a warning to us as Christians.
Absolutely.
Do not be this way, because all of your actions, there is a secret camera somewhere watching you. They will be caught.
Sure.
And of course, there aren't secret cameras, but there are eyes all around us. So if we are out there proclaiming ourselves to be upright Christians, and then we are not living that way, we are in our speech, in our actions, in our interactions with people, we're not living that way, people are going to see it. And that is a louder witness than what we say we are. And of course, that's what we get from Angela. She is a louder witness in her bad actions and her lack of Christianity at times than she is an actual conversion point for anybody.
And to her, they give, if you recall, one of the most moving sequences of the whole show. And it must have been the second or third episode before the finale. And I'll try to make it real generalized just for the sake of spoilers if you haven't seen it. But the man that she was with leaves her, and she's left completely alone, destitute. They even take the cats away, everything. And she's left with her son, whom she, to say the least, is ambivalent about. And who reaches out to her to help her but the man that she, I won't say his name, I don't, again, just for spoilers, but the man that she had judged and scrutinized and scolded for 7 years, John. He had borne the brunt of her judgmentalism, that exterior hard shell of Christianity or righteousness, I suppose. And he's the one to reach out to her. How remarkably moving.
So are you putting him in the Good Samaritan parable, the outsider who actually does the Christian action, or the faithful Jewish action that the priests of the time should have been doing?
Absolutely, and she accepts his help, and actually, not only does she accept his help, but that leads to her finally making confession of what's true in her heart about her feelings for another member of the office staff. And again, like, based on her behavior toward this person, this other character that helps her, there were no grounds for her to make a confession like this, but for her to just weep, I love him, so moving that moment belongs to her. She, the disciple who should have been the most merciful.
Is that when she becomes Zacchaeus and she realizes how she's over collected taxes? And
well, I don't know that she paid anyone back, but this is just one example. I think what I also see a lot of, and I'll kind of go in two parts, but the first part is identity, and then the second part is in second chances. Throughout this grand story, we see these characters trying to get a grip on who exactly they are. Now, I don't mean like in the first season when Kelly was one kind of character, and then they reworked her character and she was another kind of character. Like, that was just the mechanics of the show, right? But I'm talking about these people through the course of time, realizing who they are and also finding their own self, their person, in light of the relationships they have in the office. And they really kind of play into this a lot, especially in the latter seasons. What do they call the two temps that come in? Plop and young Dwight, or what they don't even call them by their real names. And then do you remember season
Dwight, is it Dwight Jr.?
Whatever it was, yeah. And then in season 2, Ryan, the cheesy pita, and then they'll only call him Fire Guy, and how much he hates that, because he doesn't want to be associated with anything negative, anything less than the best. So many of these characters go through this over and over and over again. They're struggling, trying to find their identity. And newsflash, definite spoiler alert for your life and for mine, and I imagine John's. This is the life of discipleship. We are always finding ourselves again. In Christ, and our hearts are restless until they rest in God. So there's always this shifting nature of self, always yearning for something stronger and deeper and more true. Now, if we fail to reach that goal, and we do, there's a second chance. As the song goes, the God of second chances. And goodness golly, John, if anyone in this show shows us the power of the second chance, it is Michael J. Scott. And also, who else?
Dwight gets quite a few second chances.
After he shoots the gun off.
A lot of second chances.
Yeah. And then David offers him the job, and Dwight, what did he say? I never thought I would get the job after I shot that gun off. And David's like, what? Oh, nothing. But so many, again, even Angela at the very end getting a huge second chance, with the chance of a new relationship. Just second chances abound, which really to us says in this fantasy Scranton, Pennsylvania world, and also in our own, the grace and mercy of second chances, this also abounds. For God is so full of mercy and grace, willing to forgive the second chance.
David Wallace himself gets a second chance here, the head of this great corporation. He tumbles and then ends up coming back in after he develops sucking. He sells it to the military, and then he becomes once again the head of Dunder Mifflin. So, yeah, there are definitely a lot of second chances in it. I'm not sure where else to go with that idea, but it is interesting. There are lots of redemptions that go on. There are some characters that we don't see that redemption in, though. I never appreciate the Hewitt Packard when he's there.
Oh, golly.
When Packard's in there, I just always find that to be an annoying character that never has any real redemption.
Yeah, it's curious because they did make an effort to sort of wrap up the principal players, but he was one they kind of left on the side. But I guess the same effect. They also never.
What was Packard's name? His first name? I just wanted to call him Hewitt Packard, but that's not correct.
Yeah,
Todd. Yeah, I called him Hewitt Packard as the second here. I'm like, that's not right.
I guess that's
what am I doing?
You're in the ballpark, but it's curious they never came back to him, but they also never came back to California. They never came back to what was his name? Idris Elba's character. You remember when he was the manager for a little while? Will Ferrell's character. So, granted, like at the end, you just kind of have to cut it loose. I think also something else along the.
We see that with Nellie, though. You see this character that you, in the beginning, very much despise. And you see how broken she is. She's got a shopping thing. She can't get a child adopted. And then but you find this someone that's very annoying, and then you are softened to her as you go on. And I run into a lot of people like that at first too. They just bug me, and after a while, you're like, oh, I can actually have sympathy for this person, as we let them in.
Yeah, what a profound lesson there. And it seems silly to say, what a profound lesson The Office is teaching us. But if you're not going to learn it anywhere else, you might as well learn it here. That this is inspired truth. That it is not simply about just loving your enemies, but really developing a sort of, forgive, for lack of a better term, but you'll know what to say, John. You always do. A tolerance for them. And you're right. This
empathy. I tolerate you now.
But long suffering, from the Psalms. This commitment to, you don't have to be in love, but to loving them through sort of peaceful living, just being with the other person. And you're right. A lot of these people that we meet at first in the show are deplorable. And then, even if we, the viewer, do not come to love them, somehow in The Office, peace is made, peace is struck. Although not ever, never, ever, John, between Michael and Toby. Now,
I find the Ryan character fascinating because you dislike Ryan. And he becomes less and less likable as you go. And Ryan, BJ Novak, he's one of the writers. And what astounds me about that is it would be so difficult for me as a writer to write my character into something that people will despise. And that is such as a writer, we all have this desire to be loved and adored, and to make your character the one that everyone eventually just hates. And you hate Ryan in a special way because he's so vapid and so self-centered. Michael's self-centered, but it's a very innocent side
right,
to it.
Yeah, sure.
Ryan is self-centered, and it is it's a very disgusting kind of real yucky kind of self-centeredness.
And his story ends so sadly. He's one of the characters who
and I find
he
that
gets what
curious.
He gets what he wants-ish, but it ends up just being, again, it's just selfish and destructive. He abandons a baby. What, John? Please,
He can't reach that moment of conversion. He's wanting, but he's not getting there, and I just find that interesting. There's something about the actual writer there as he's writing this character, making people dislike him more and more. There's something about a sacrifice there. There's a self-sacrifice that goes on, not in the Ryan character, but actually in the writer character's life.
Absolutely.
Life. So,
lots of writer actors there. Paul Lieberstein is Toby, and then Mindy Kaling is Kelly, and then BJ Novak is Ryan. Are there any others? I can't remember. Kind of my last little featurette here, as far as those spiritual fruits that are evident, forgiveness. And we kind of started the gushing really by talking about Jim and Pam, and in that last season, their marriage is really on the precipice. Where you feel it may fall over. It may. Yeah.
I can remember you watching and you being like, John, you got to see the next episode. Like 90% chance that Pam has an affair with the camera guy. I'm like, that's not going to happen. You're like, no, you got to watch the episode. You thought it was going to happen. I never thought it was.
When she went over there, and then I don't know.
Maybe it wasn't 90%, but you gave it pretty high odds.
Thanks. It just seemed like they were moving in that direction because she was so far displaced from Jim in her heart, and he was so far from her. I remember those episodes where it was like he would just barely put, his arm around her or whatever, and she almost would recoil a little bit. You just couldn't stand to even sit next to him. The beloved, it's like looking at a beautiful painting. The beloved scene of them sitting next to each other in the office, so heartwarming, so charming, and now so cold. But indeed, they find forgiveness. And not only do they find it, they exchange it generously with each other and kiss. And the taxi's there with the meter running. John, very powerful. You wouldn't have spent that money. Sorry. Gotta go. Meter's running. But another just stirring moment And we look at that, just as secularists, we look at it and say, oh, how wonderful, and we have the feelings, and that's nice. But as Christians, we really can go a step further. We can go beyond and see a moment like that and intentionally remind ourselves how much greater is God's love. That even if Jim and Pam can find reconciliation, so can we with God, even though we have so disgraced him by our sin. And this maybe is kind of where I wanted to end, with those little meditations, because this is so profound, not only for myself, but for so many people that I have spoken with about their personal lives and about their spiritual life. How do I know that God can forgive me? And the church can offer so many delightful answers, the promises of Scripture, but how can I know that God can forgive me after what I've done? And what do we offer? Well, Jesus offers himself, and we offer the evidence of the Spirit itself, testifying, this is the work of your life. This is the gift that God gives into you, the gift of forgiveness. And so, all from The Office? Yeah, all from The Office. It's all there. That's the power of
reflected in The Office.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. No, John. I mean, in The Office, begotten of I'm teasing. Begotten of Greg Daniels. No. But this is part of the work that we as Christians can do while engaging with popular media, is looking at it through the lens of faith, right? And seeing not only how the light with a capital L shines in, but what light with a smaller L and italicized can shine out onto us.
Not to backtrack.
Yeah.
Good summary of forgiveness and that caveat. One of the things that I would want to call out with that, Jim, there are two ideas more that I would like us to approach. With that relationship there at the end with Pam and Jim, I found it a little tedious. It wasn't as enjoyable as the beginning part, but what was really neat about it was that it became a choice. In the beginning, there's this magical love story, and then it becomes a little mundane. And guess what? That's exactly how our relationships are. When I started dating my wife, or when I first saw her, and then we started dating, there was all those butterflies and excitement, and there was Office music playing all the time, and a little piano twinkling. And then it becomes the everyday life stuff, and it isn't quite as exciting, but we make a choice. And you even see Pam and Jim doing that too. They're fighting. They go to counseling. Let me express my feelings to you. They're always telling each other how that makes them
an
feel.
Aching episode. Yeah, I would like to acknowledge your sacrifice.
Yeah.
So sure.
They do counseling and everything, and they both have to work at the relationship, even these two people. And that should be a good lesson. And that is something that's valuable about The Office, is these two almost perfect characters from the TV stand show point. They're the perfect characters. They have to work at their relationship. They have to make it work. They have to go forward by choice. Love is a choice, not just the feeling. And so that is a very enduring part about the show. Not enduring.
Endearing, yes.
You know what I'm saying. Endearing,
yes.
Thank you. But it is enduring also. And so I really appreciate that in that relationship, they have to struggle to make it work, because all of us in real life who want to be the Pam and Jim characters, we have to work it for it too. We have to struggle for it. The other thing, though, talking about it from a Catholic perspective, a Christian perspective, I think there's also a general commentary on our culture that it needs to be noted. And this comes in this idea that these characters are presented as good, and all of the characters are enjoyable and good. And they're all living somewhat morally compromised lives, some of them to quite extremes in various ways. And this is a part of our media that we need to be conscious of, and its effect on us. The danger in watching The Office, and why I actually don't really recommend it to people, even though I enjoy it, is because there is a bit of an insidious thing that happens when we watch people. All of them are having relationships outside of marriage at some point in time. we watch that and we go, but they're still good people. And so it can make it morally confusing because you have people that are genuinely good and enjoyable people doing things that are wrong. And so that can become a confusing thing. And this is how we get into this thing. Well, we're just good people. We're really just called to be good people. And that's not true. We are called to be good people, but we're also called to be moral people that conform to something higher than ourselves. And so the Office is a great study in this, in that you've got very enjoyable characters, but you need to be able to recognize the disconnect also in their characters, that they aren't the models. They aren't people that we necessarily want to emulate. Jim, who's, of course, our star boy, he's kind of a jerk. Yeah, he's smarmy and smart aleck, and he's a bit elitist, and even Pam gets a little bit of that in the end. But there's it's important when we watch media to not let it become confusing to us. That idea that you've got good people that are doing bad things, so therefore the bad things don't seem as bad anymore because good people are doing them. And that's throughout almost all of our media that we watch today.
What's challenging to that effect is that, unlike a show like Game of Thrones, for example, which is set in a different universe, it's fantasy, and so it's clear that these people do not really exist. This is simply fantasy. But then we come to The Office, which is a mockumentary, right? A mocking of a documentary about real life. And you're absolutely right, where it would be easy to see that blur a little bit. And so, and the show's teaching us, they're training us to want to not only love certain characters, but then perhaps in our own lives to emulate that. I think the That's What She Said humor is an excellent example of that, how that creeps in and through so many different things in our society, even to this day, but how utterly disrespectful that kind of humor is. I remember being caught up in that too. Like, I thought it was funny, and me and my friends would joke about it, and that's what she said, her. But eventually you have to step away from that. And I think that one thing that we did bring up, but maybe didn't harp on quite enough, is really having that critical mind kind of always going. And just like you said, what Ben had brought up in emails before the show about Angela, like how she's the very worst representation of Christianity that you want, because not only is she a hypocrite, but she embodies all of the things about the true spirit of Christianity that we want to disconnect ourselves from. Christianity is a relationship with a living God, a freeing relationship. But of course, Angela represents this very tired, old, rusty kind of mechanism of religion, and that's not what we see at all. That's not what we want to say at all. And so having that critical mind to know that perhaps you enjoy the show, can you get something out of it? Yes or no? And if it's all no's across the board, move on, go in a new direction, because there's so much great TV out there to watch, or different things to enjoy beyond, whatever it is that John watches. I don't know, you got EWTN on for the kids. I don't know.
yeah. But you mentioned Game of Thrones. Like, that's a show, like, there's just too much nudity in that show that we won't watch that. And I'm sure it's a delightful story, but that's one of those places where the Office is by far not perfect, but there are places where it's like, this would be delightful. I'd love to be able to enter into conversations with people, but that's one of the places that I personally don't want to be filling my head with those images and then have to struggle with that in my life and in my marriage. And and that is a disturbing thing. This is not The Office now. With Netflix, I noticed so many of their shows have just casual nudity. You'll be watching a scene, and all of a sudden the next scene somebody's walking across naked, and I'm like, what is going on? It just was not needed. And that goes in that same vein of what I disliked about The Office, is that it's trying to normalize things that are not healthy behaviors. Love and intimacy and sex, those are awesome. They are incredible gifts that God has given us, but they, when we misuse them, can be destructive to our hearts and our persons, and can lead to grief and misery and depression and all kinds of things when we misuse those things, because we know that they are precious. And so anything that encourages us to misuse such beautiful gifts is something that we do need to be cautious of. And no nudity in The Office.
Well,
Well, I think maybe you see Dwight from the behind.
Yeah, I think it's here and there. But anyway, time to wrap up. Final question. Are you ready? What is your favorite scene from The Office? Go.
My favorite scene is at the Glee party when they're at Gabe's house, which character I also despised and never appreciated. And even Erin, I didn't appreciate her that much. But they're at Gabe's house, and Michael disconnects the cable. He then realizes how much he's hurt everybody. He goes downstairs to rehook up the cable. Erin comes down and says, "You did this?" And they have this conversation. And then she's so hurt that Michael won't like Gabe because she has recognized him as the father figure in her life that she doesn't have because she's an orphan. And Michael, who is this totally self-centered character, has this moment of clarity and plays the father role, tells her to go to her room. And he steps outside of himself, and he is what somebody else needs him to be. And that is a really wonderful moment. And then that ties within that episode when Michael is leaving. He sits down with Erin outside, and she's asking him, should she be with Andy, or should she be with who is the other one that he's thinking about?
Klopp, or whoever it is, the other, the
temp. And he says, you know what? Maybe you're too good for both of them. You know, and so that scene there, and it's even a character I don't really appreciate there in Erin, but that moment where we see Michael do that at that Glee watching party, that I think is one of the best moments. Another secret one is when there is the fire alarm, when Dwight sets off the fire alarm in the beginning of one of the episodes, and Angela opens up her drawer, whips out a cat, and throws it up into the ceiling to save it. Probably the best opener is that scene. I can watch that over and over again, and I laugh every time. She whips open that drawer, there's a cat in there, and she throws it up into the ceiling for Oscar to save.
Mine, I don't remember the episode, but it's that whole running shtick of the snowball fight that Jim and Dwight have, and then Dwight hides inside the snowman, right? And then when Jim and Pam leave that evening, they're leaving the office and it's dark.
Dwight's on the roof.
But
he
set up all those. He set up all the snowmen in the parking lot, and Jim flips, and he's like destroying all the snowmen with his umbrella, trying to see where Dwight is. Oh my gosh, I just think that's so funny. So not as touching as yours. Yeah.
No, but it is a good moment where Jim gets something. Jim is really quite awful to Dwight, and we all revel in that. But he is quite awful to Dwight throughout the whole series, and Dwight really got him back good.
Yeah,
and it was
absolutely.
Not that I am advocating revenge in any sense, but for the sake of comedy here in a TV show with fictional characters, that is delightful.
This has been the Catholic Forge. Thank you for listening. We'd like to close as always with prayer and a blessing. May God the Father, God the Son,
and God the Holy Spirit bless you, guard you, and lead you to eternal life. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Amen. Thank you for listening to the Catholic Forge. We hope you've enjoyed this episode and will leave us a positive rating and review on iTunes, SoundCloud, or YouTube. You can continue the conversation with us on Facebook and Twitter, and to get a hold of us, you can reach us at thecatholicforge@gmail.com. For more information regarding the show, you can check out our website at www. Oh, John, I couldn't do it. I know you wanted me to try to trick him with 4 W's, so I couldn't make me laugh too much. www.thecatholicforge.com. We especially thank our office aficionado wives for their continued support of this project, and we thank you very, very much for listening.